not about preaching unity and reconciliation. It's not just being nice and saying we want to be one, we want to be one. We want to be one. It's about creating institutions and putting in place instruments and mechanisms to make sure that you actually implement that kind of idea and uphold those values and ethics that will lead you into true reconciliation.
Without exception, reading through the text of Genocide Deniers, there is a consistent mixture of falsehoods, half-truths to produce blah blah and lies.
Rwandans were murdered in a planned, systematic campaign. My books show that the evidence for this is overwhelming. The purpose of the killing was to eliminate a human group.
Most genocide deniers would pretend to be siding with opposition, in inverted commas, as people who are fighting for human rights, as people who are aspiring for the best of the country, as people who are fighting for justice, without exception. For them, they become custodians, they pretend to be custodians of truth.
What's happening is people are working together even though they have a very bitter history together. And I would like to ask Mr. Ambassador, what is the Rwandan government doing to sustain this reconciliation process we have started?
We're enforcing and consolidating peace and stability in our country, which is key for development. We are consolidating and fostering unity and reconciliation to make sure that people continue to live together, build confidence among our people, build trust among our people, to make sure that the future generations are not going to be affected by the differences that were created, as I mentioned in my presentation. Continue to build democratic institutions to ensure good governance and deliver services, sustain our economic growth, and to make sure that we deliver services and improve the lives of our people. Continue to invest in health programs and education to make sure that our society has health and very well educated, and make sure that all the processes are owned by our people, and that way you're sure of sustainability, and that's why we have I should say, invested in the programs that are identified by people through local authorities and local structures. And that is the only way that you can sustain and consolidate the achievements that we have. To make sure that this country, by the year 2020, we achieve the middle income countries as it is envisaged in the Vision 2020, whereby we have defined clearly where we want to be in the next 10 years. And we are seeing results when we measure every year, every aspect of the Vision 2020, we are seeing a lot of progress and our remarkable progress in those areas.
When people talk about genocide deniers, most of the time these people are based in the US, in the United States, in Europe, or in Asia, or whatever, and we don't see them on the ground. And I wonder how you think that these people have an impact on people working in Rwanda. How do you relate that?
It's very critical for us as Rwandans, but also with friends to fight all the deniers, different categories, the deniers who try to deny genocide as a cover because of what they did. They are perpetrators of genocide, so for obvious reasons they're going to defend themselves. So those that committed the crime itself should be brought to justice, and I think we are seeing a lot of results in terms of working with different governments to apprehend and bring some of the perpetrators to justice. We are pushing, and we've been talking to the government here, and our government is talking to different governments around the world to make sure that these people are brought to justice. Yesterday, as you heard in our presentation, we were talking about the fact that the existence of the perpetrators of genocide in the United States is not acceptable. We cannot allow people who committed such a heinous crime to be the professors and teach the American future generation. And I think the message is sinking, and I think it's going through, and we are expecting the cooperation from the law enforcement institutions to make sure that these people are brought to justice.
and it is the foundation stone of the defence case in Arusha. And it is this, that the RPF on the 6th of April 1994 assassinated President Habyarimana. This is their foundation stone at the ICTR, that the victims brought the genocide upon themselves, that there was a spontaneous uprising of Hutu because the RPF had shot down President Habyarimana's plane. There is not one shred of credible evidence that this is the case. Not one. There has been a French report by a French investigating magistrate called Jean-Louis Bruguière, and he relied on a series of witnesses, so-called informers, who, as former RPF officers, claimed to have heard the plot discussed by President Kagame through an open window. These witnesses were granted asylum in Norway, and they have since then retracted their testimony. They have retracted their testimony. The missile casings upon which Jean-Louis Bruguière relied turned out to have been provided to his inquiry by Colonel Theonest Bagosora, who is a prime suspect in the assassination of President Habyarimana.
The motives of deniers are two or threefold. For the perpetrators and their friends, denial is a form of defense. They cannot accept the crime they committed, knowing that this crime is heinous and is condemned by the whole world. Two, there are people who engage in denialism because of trying to be different. And this, you find it in a category of academics, trying to get another narrative.
But to say that the group that was identified for extermination somehow provoked the actors into carrying out genocide. And you start to look at, Professor Melbourne said about the farce of this. Oh, if there's no genocide, then how could you provoke it? And even so, provocation is not a crime, but committing genocide is. And so they find these individuals with an agenda, political and otherwise, to do so-called research and give expert opinions on some of these things that are admitted. Now, the tragedy of that is that many times it doesn't get confronted or refuted. The document is out there, it's circulated, they introduce it as evidence, and then they start to cite to it. Whether or not it's accepted as credible evidence, they're saying in Military One, here's this report from this esteemed professor saying thus and so. And so the whole propaganda campaign, if you would, goes on. So in many respects, because of the rules of law and evidence and how the tribunal operates and how those who are in charge of it allows it to operate, by trying to maintain, again, this neutral position, as Western journalists do, many times they end up being supporters of these positions and of genocide ideology.